Welcome to our discovery of the federal bureaucratic accountability. When it comes to public service, everyone is watching. The courts, through the mechanism of lawsuits, review the actions of the executive and legislative branches to ensure that they are constitutional and legal. Congress and the President, as the creators and funders of bureaucracies, can threaten to revamp or eliminate any bureaucracy or to decrease its funding if its performance falls short of expectations. Congress and the President not only structure bureaucracies to foster efficient, effective, and accountable public service, but also pass laws to increase self-policing by bureaucrats. People outside government, including many ordinary citizens, also keep a close eye on bureaucracies. National sunshine laws open up government functions and documents to the public, ensuring transparency and the public's right to know about government, business, and decision-making. But these laws are effective only if citizens know about them and take advantage of them. One of the first national sunshine laws for the enhancement of bureaucratic accountability to the people was the Administrative Procedure Act, or APA, of 1946. The APA responded to citizens and interest groups' concerns about the fast growth in the number of agencies involved in administrative rulemaking and about the lack of transparency and accountability of the bureaucratic rulemakers. The APA, which applies to all federal agencies except those specifically excluded by legislation, standardizes rulemaking procedures and requires bureaucracies to publicize their proposed rules in the Federal Register, a daily national government publication. They also must publish an invitation for people to offer comments on the agency's proposals. Once the agency collects and reviews the people's comments, it must publish its approved rules in the Federal Register. To facilitate this open process, the national government website, www.regulations.gov, posts proposed administrative rules and accepts electronically submitted comments on the rules. In this way, people can have a voice in administrative rulemaking. Such citizen input is essential to democracy because bureaucrats propose and approve more administrative rules each year than the pieces of legislation proposed and approved by Congress and the President. The second act, or way that the bureaucracy is accountable to the people, is the Freedom of Information Act, or FOIA, F-O-I-A. And this is a 1966 amendment to the APA. So why don't you pause and write that down. The Freedom of Information Act requires national agencies to give citizens access to government documents upon request and at a reasonable cost. Make sure you write that definition down. So if you need to pause and rewind, go ahead and do that. After the terrorist attacks on September 11, 2001, however, the national government denied an increasing percentage of such requests in the name of national security. The decreased access to government documents has heightened tensions between people advocating government confidentiality on the one hand and individuals cherishing democratic openness and those dedicated to holding the national bureaucracy accountable on the other hand. You might want to write down those two opposing forces. The American Society of Newspaper Editors was so concerned about the diminished access that it established Sunshine Week, first held March 13th through the 20th, 2005, to educate citizens about their right to know and to request information about the bureaucracy, what the bureaucracy is doing. Another law that aims to make the federal bureaucracy open and responsive to the people, make sure you write this down, is the Government in the Sunshine Act of 1976. This act of Congress requires all multi-headed national agencies, except those in the executive office of the President, which is an important distinction, to conduct open, public meetings where citizens can testify and present their concerns about these agencies' actions, whether it be past, current, or potential, and the procedures by which they make decisions. National agencies are now also using the Internet to make government more transparent. In September 2000, the General Services Administration of the national government launched its first Gov website, the national government's one-stop portal to national, state, local, and tribal government agency websites. This portal puts government information and services at your fingertips. In 2007, the General Services Administration renamed the website USA.gov, or www.usa.gov. in response to feedback from users who wanted a name that was easier to remember. Strongly supporting the use of the Internet as a means to enhance citizen access to government information and services, Congress approved and President George W. Bush signed into law the E-Government Act of 2002. This law established a federal chief information officer within the Office of Management and Budget. Moreover, it requires national agencies to use Internet-based information technology. President Barack Obama promised that under his administration, the federal government will provide Americans with an unprecedented level of openness, collaboration, and efficiency and effectiveness through the use of information technology. Private organizations that monitor and evaluate the activities of bureaucrats have certainly taken advantage of sunshine laws and e-government. For example, in 2007, Congress passed legislation to establish an independent, bipartisan commission to investigate U.S. wartime contracting in Iraq and Afghanistan. Senator Claire McCaskill, Democrat from Missouri, the bill's co-sponsor, praised POGO, which is the Project on Government Oversight, work in supporting these provisions, along with the support of other watchdog groups, including Taxpayers for Common Sense, the Government Accountability Project, OMB Watch, Common Sense, U.S. PIRG, and Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America. In addition to taking advantage of their right to government documents under the Freedom of Information Act, watchdog groups are more likely than the average citizen to use government websites to track bureaucratic activities. In a democracy, bureaucrats, like elected officials, operate in a fishbowl, working face-to-face or computer screen to computer screen with the people whom they serve. They are in full view of anyone interested in monitoring them. Sunshine laws and e-government provide citizens with the means to find out what is going on in the bureaucracy. When citizens or watchdog groups identify a problem with bureaucratic operations, they frequently turn to the media to bring public attention to the issue, because the media are always ready to report on bureaucratic inefficiency and impropriety. A more expensive option for citizen and interest group action against bureaucratic waste and misconduct is the filing of a lawsuit. As bureaucratic agencies implement policy, they must comply with constitutional guarantees of due process and equal protection laws. A citizen believing that bureaucrats have violated those rights can challenge bureaucratic actions through the agency's quasi-judicial process discussed earlier. If the citizen is not satisfied with the result of this quasi-judicial recourse, he or she can sue the agency through the courts. Through the litigation process, the U.S. judicial system seeks to ensure that administrative agencies conduct their quasi-legislative and quasi-judicial functions in compliance with the constitutional guarantees of due process in the 5th and 14th Amendments, as well as the Administrative Procedure Act of 1946. In 2006, for example, Federal District Judge Richard Leon ruled that the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, procedures and notices to Hurricane Katrina victims were so difficult to understand that evacuees were deprived of due process because they were unable to determine what the process was. According to ACORN, a housing advocacy group that brought the lawsuit, as many as 11,000 families may have been wrongfully denied long-term housing assistance by the lack of due process in FEMA procedures. Bureaucrats must always keep in mind the preferences and the agenda of Congress if they want to survive, for Congress approves the legislation that creates, regulates, and funds bureaucracies. The Senate has an additional mechanism for promoting bureaucratic accountability, in that more than 1/4 of the President's appointees are subject to Senate confirmation. The confirmation process for top bureaucrats gives senators a degree of influence over the leadership and direction of executive department agencies. Another means by which Congress encourages bureaucratic accountability is the monitoring of bureaucracy's policy implementation, a form of legislative oversight. When the media, citizens, or interest groups bring concerns about a bureaucracy's policy implementation to the attention of legislators, Congress might launch an investigation. If, consequently, Congress and the President are dissatisfied with that bureaucracy's performance or behavior, they can cut its budget, modify its legal authority, or even eliminate the agency. In most cases, oversight does not occur unless citizens, interest groups, and the media push for congressional action, as occurred in the aftermath of September 11th, when public pressure forced Congress to create the 9/11 Commission to investigate the terrorist attacks on the World Trade Center in New York City and on the Pentagon in Arlington, Virginia. An evaluation of bureaucratic performance can also be required in the authorization legislation by a sunset clause. Make sure you write this definition down, which forces the expiration of the program or policy after a specified number of years, unless Congress reauthorizes it through new legislation. If you need to take a minute and pause, please do that. The President also has several tools for holding bureaucracies accountable. Like Congress, the President can use the authorization and appropriation processes to ensure accountability. In addition, because most top political appointees serve at the President's pleasure, they are responsive to the President's policy preferences. And in this way, they and their agencies are accountable to the President. Today, the OMB, an EOP agency, is the key lever in the President's efforts to hold the bureaucracy accountable. The OMB evaluates bureaucratic performance for the President. On the basis of OMB performance assessments, the President proposes budget increases or decreases, agency growth or elimination, or even a reorganization of the executive branch in which agencies are consolidated. In addition to overseeing performance evaluations of bureaucratic agencies, the OMB spearheads the development of the President's budget, controls the implementation of appropriation laws, and regulates administrative rulemaking. If you need to pause and rewind to write those criteria down, please do that. Through its Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs, the OMB ensures that regulations created by executive branch agencies are not unnecessarily costly and support the President's policy preferences. The President, Congress, the courts, and ordinary citizens have multiple means by which to hold bureaucrats accountable. But bureaucrats, who themselves are taxpayers, also worry about inefficiency and waste in public service. Legislated codes of behaviors and whistleblower protections help to foster accountability from within bureaucracies. To ensure the best public service, bureaucracies have codes of behavior. These codes specify guidelines for ethical, efficient, and effective behavior on the part of bureaucrats. Each government agency has its own code. In addition, in 1992, the Office of Government Ethics published a comprehensive set of ethical standards for national bureaucrats. Moreover, many of the professions in which bureaucrats are members, lawyers, doctors, nurses, accountants, engineers, and so on, also have established codes of behavior. Importantly, however, codes of behavior are just guidelines. They do not stipulate what a bureaucrat should do in a given situation. Thus, bureaucrats must use discretion when applying such codes to their daily work of providing public service. The Ethics of Government Act of 1978 established the United States Office of Government Ethics, which is charged with preventing conflicts of interest by bureaucrats. A conflict of interest arises when a public servant is in a position to make a decision or take an action from which he or she can personally benefit. In such a situation, the public servant's private interest is in conflict with his or her responsibility to serve the public interest. A key to the prevention of conflicts of interest is the requirement that top government officials must disclose their finances. Whistleblower laws offer an additional means of internal accountability in the national bureaucracy. The 1978 Civil Service Reform Act provided some protections to civil servants, or whistleblowers. Make sure you write that down, even though I didn't put it in the Prezi. That's the 1978 Civil Service Reform Act provided some protections to whistleblowers. These are employees who disclose government misconduct, waste, mismanagement, abuse of authority, or a threat to public health or safety. The CSRA, that's the Civil Service Reform Act, established the Office of Special Counsel to protect whistleblowers' job security. Then in 1986, thanks to the lobbying efforts of many groups, including the Project on Government Oversight, Congress approved the False Claims Act. This allows for a monetary reward for government whistleblowers who expose fraud that harms the U.S. government. In another attempt to improve internal accountability, Congress approved the Inspector General Act in 1978. This law aims to ensure the integrity of public service by creating government watchdogs called inspectors general, appointed by the President and embedded in government agencies to monitor policy implementation and investigate alleged misconduct. The law requires the appointment of the inspectors general without regard to their political affiliation and strictly on the basis of their abilities in accounting, auditing, or investigation. We're supposed to check our politics at the door and call things as we see them. If we uncover things that reflect badly on the government, we're legally and morally obliged to report it. We're obliged to do that for the good of the country. So explained Clark Ervin, who held the position of Inspector General at the State and Homeland Security Departments. In summary, whistleblower protection laws and inspectors general enhance the ability of the bureaucrats themselves to police the agencies in which they work, and sunshine laws give government outsiders various instruments for monitoring the bureaucracy. But many citizens and government officials believe that more needs to be done to improve bureaucratic record of performance.